Hi friends, I wanted to get back to you since the first act of the Impeachment Circus is now history. And we'll talk about how things wrapped up and what happens next with this. I know people are getting so sick and tired of all of it, but again, this is history for our country and it does affect all of our futures. And there's so much hype and so much misinformation out there, and we've got the pundits and the protagonists and the antagonists and the people are looking to make some money off of this whole thing. Everybody has an angle on this, but my goal here is to just cut through all of the nonsense, the haze, the smoke, the hype, the politics of it, and get down to the basics of what's happening here and what's likely to happen. Well, we have seen the hearings before the House Intelligence Committee have wrapped up now. They finished yesterday with the last of the witnesses that Chairman Schiff called. Remember, these were his witnesses only. None of the witnesses that the Republicans really wanted were allowed to testify because of these stupid rules that the Democrat majority in the House put forth. And so this was basically it was a Democrat show. The Republicans had to defend, to challenge, but they couldn't produce a case of their own. So what we're left with essentially is, and first of all, the last day of the hearings, they had a few inconsequential witnesses. Nobody gave any coherent, real, first-hand testimony of evidence to prove that President Trump did anything wrong, let alone anything worthy of being impeached. So let's say that again. There is no basic first-hand evidence of any of the witnesses that have been put forth so far by Schiff and his motley crew that proves that President Trump did anything wrong. Now, having said that, that doesn't mean the Democrats won't continue to pursue impeachment. They are hell-bent to do this. They've been hell-bent to do this since he was elected in 2016, and they refuse to accept the fact that this man is our president. Whether you like that or not, he was duly elected, legally elected by the laws of this nation, and that's just the way it is. And as far as the job he's done, many people think he's done a wonderful job. Others have some questions. I realize that. But there's no denying that the economy is much better than it has been. And there's no denying that we're dealing with other nations far differently than people did before. And that's the crux of what has gone on here as far as the involvement of people from the deep state, the permanent bureaucrat class in Washington, the people who think that they make the policy and they're the experts on how we should deal with any other nations and so on. So Trump he's not a part of that. He didn't live in that world. He had no experience in that world, so to speak, other than any kind of international business he may have done over the years, which I'm sure he has done considerable amount, but I'm not an expert on that. But the bottom line is that Trump is doing things differently, and they don't like it a bit. On top of that, you have the corrupt, compromised people in power who are scared to death that the truth is going to come out and expose their corruption. That's why the whole Biden situation has been so scary for the Democrats. He was going to be their guy that was going to take over after they got rid of Trump. He was going to win the 2020 election, and we'd see somewhat of a return to the policies of Barack Obama. Well, obviously, that's not going to happen because Biden, in addition to all this sleazy corruption that's coming out about him and his family, he's showing signs of, I don't know if it's Alzheimer's or dementia or what it is, but he's just getting to the point that he's telling the American people, I'm just too old to do this and you can't trust me with my finger on the nuclear button. So, and the more debates he's in, the more he proves it. So at any rate, their plans are being ruined because all the rest of the members of the Democratic presidential candidates field are just either incompetents, Looney Tunes, or rank amateurs who obviously couldn't do the job if they had a manual to guide them. So what's happening is the Democrats are panicked that Trump could get reelected and more of his policies could happen over the next 4 years, and their power will continue to be diminished. Now, the other thing, again, that you need to look at, there are some reports out there that Pelosi may be dirty with Ukraine, that there's some evidence that her son made serious money in Ukraine. And remember, Ukraine was one of the most corrupt countries in the world up until Zelensky's election, where he's promised to clean up some of that corruption. It was basically a land filled with bribery and extortion and money laundering, which is typical because that's part of what happened after the Soviet Union collapsed. The thugs who were running the government now became the private sector thugs who manipulated the system and became billionaires. And of course, some of these American politicians thought, hey, there's easy money to be made here, and they jumped right in. So the thing we're dealing with that's unique about President Trump is he already was a billionaire before he ran for office. So he's not in it for the money. He doesn't need the money. He doesn't need to curry favor with potential people who could pad his income, because quite frankly, his businesses are successful to the point that he doesn't need their money. And that's what's given him the freedom that many other previous presidents just didn't have. And, they had to think about, what's my legacy going to be? What's my financial portfolio going to be? I mentioned before in a previous video here that, here we see Bill and Hillary Clinton come into office when he's making $37,000 a year as governor of Arkansas, and then they go to Washington for 8 years and they leave there and they're worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Now it's probably billions because of all the extortion they've done through the Clinton Family Foundation, or as Rush calls it, the Clinton Crime Family Foundation. And the same thing is true to a lesser extent with Obama and his wife. They weren't wealthy people when they first came in, although I think Michelle was making $350,000 a year after he became a U.S. Senator because some hospital in Chicago wanted an in, so they gave her a job, and then when he ran for president and won, then she quit the job and they eliminated the position. So what does that tell you? But at any rate, they just bought another home. They have a multi-million-dollar home in the Washington, D.C. area, and then they bought another, was it a $12 million home out on Martha's Vineyard up in Massachusetts. It's a good gig if you can get it. But again, Trump was coming from the point of view where he had his money, he had his homes, he had his toys, whatever it is that he may want. So that wasn't going to be an enticement. People think the only reason he wanted to be president was to satisfy his ego, and maybe some of that's true. But I think he has also shown a side where he truly does care about the American people and the American nation. At least his rhetoric is very convincing of that. And he has been pretty consistent in putting America first and focusing on nationalism instead of this move towards a globalism where America just blends into the rest of the world and there's nothing special and unique about us like many of the other presidents viewed things. So at any rate, what we saw out of this first round of impeachment inquisition by Schiff and Pelosi and their minions is that they didn't get what they wanted. The support for impeachment was supposed to grow. It was supposed to scare off some of the Republicans so that they would come out publicly and say, yes, let's impeach the president. Aside from that, lousy failed presidential candidate and liberal Massachusetts Governor Mitt Romney, no Republican has come out and really said, hey, let's impeach the guy. We got to get rid of him. So assuming that all of the Republicans in the House of Representatives will hold fast, which they did on this first vote, as long as they don't agree to further any of the future impeachment votes, which will be coming, of course, they can present a very solid case that, no, this is a Democrat game. This is nothing that the American people really want or a united American government wants because of a serious problem in the executive branch. So what we're seeing is, now that the Intelligence Committee is done with its spectacle, the first act in the circus, so to speak. They will write up a report, send that to the Judiciary Committee, where our good goofball friend Gerald Nadler resides, New York Democrat congressman. He so bungled the Mueller report and the fallout and had Mueller put Mueller under the gun to testify, and poor old Mueller, he's, just a few steps away from where Biden is. And that was a disaster for them too. So that's one of the reasons why Nancy Pelosi sent this to Schiff and Intelligence rather than Judiciary, where it should have been, is she just, and her handlers just told her, look, Schiff can't, or Nadler can't do it, you gotta let Schiff do it. But now Schiff can't take it any further. It has to go through Judiciary, where they officially draft articles of impeachment, in other words, the charges against the president. And then what will have to happen is there will have to, once those are approved in that committee, and they will be because there's a Democrat majority in that committee, so the Republicans will all vote against them and the Democrats all vote for them. It'll move to the whole House, and there will be a vote in the House to approve those articles of impeachment and send them to the Senate. Now, the only thing that would stop that at this point is if enough Democrats defect from Pelosi and her tyranny and vote against them. I don't know if there's any chance in the world of that happening. Most of the Democrat caucus and the majority in the House are pretty much radical people. I mean, we saw 2 Democrats vote against this first phase, but they'd need quite a few more. I can't remember the exact number, but the way the rules are, it only takes a simple majority to move these to the Senate for the Senate trial. So that would mean 218 votes. So it's possible that that could happen. When that does then move to the Senate, then there is a trial in the Senate to decide whether or not these charges are valid or not, whether the president is guilty or not. It's presided over by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, that would be John Roberts, and all of the senators sit in session essentially as the jury. Now, the one huge difference that will happen is the Republicans control the Senate, so they have a little more control over what happens. That means Lindsey Graham and the Senate Judiciary Committee can guide what happens with that. They can put terms and conditions on how they're going to approach this. They can set the rules for the impeachment trial. And that means that if senators are going to be allowed to call witnesses or what have you, I mean, they can basically do what they want within the normal rules of jurisprudence. But the big thing is that when there is a trial, it's no longer an inquisition where only one side gets to call the shots. Both sides get represented equally. The president will have his team of lawyers there. They will have subpoena power to call whichever witness they want. And then the Democrats present their side of the story. The president and his people present their side of the story. Which means that Schiff can't veto any witnesses. It means that if the president's attorneys want to call, say, Schiff himself, because he may have dirty fingers in this too, if in fact he did coach the whistleblower as to how to put this whole complaint together, or his staff did. The staff could be subpoenaed. The whistleblower himself will most probably be subpoenaed and be forced to testify because of the fact that basic American judicial rules say that every accused person has the right to confront their accuser in open court. That's why we don't have these secret Soviet-style trials like Schiff tried to do here in the House. When it gets to the Senate, those rules no longer apply. So this whistleblower, and look, his name is all, and his picture is all over the internet. Even though nobody in the media is going to mention his name, and none of the people in Congress are going to mention his name, and Facebook and YouTube are attacking anybody who mentions his name. They're deleting videos and suppressing videos. But the truth of the matter is, if you want to know who he is, just search it online. You'll find it all over the place, the guy's name, and also pictures. In fact, I saw a picture today of him shaking hands with President Obama, because this guy, if this is the person that they're claiming, He was in the CIA. He's a Democrat operative. He's a strong Democrat, strong Obama supporter, worked with Biden fairly closely when Biden was vice president, and he's somebody that basically Trump should have got rid of when he came into office. So if Trump made any rookie mistakes, it was in not cleaning out the leftovers from Obama. I mean, as president, he had every right to replace anybody in the executive branch that he didn't want there and put his own people in. He is the chief executive officer of the executive branch, the presidential branch, and all those departments and people work for him. They're under him. So if he decides he wants to fire all the Joint Chiefs of Staff and replace them with different military leaders, he has the right to do that. If he wants to get rid of all the ambassadors that were out there serving all across the world and put all of his own people in there, he had the right to do that. He had the right to name his own Attorney General, his own Secretary of State. Yeah, there were Senate confirmation hearings on that, but it gets pretty dicey for it to turn to political spats just people don't like who he wants to have, serve. So these were some of the things he probably should have done but just didn't, and this is one of the guys that should have been replaced but wasn't. But it didn't happen, so this is where we are. But this guy will have to come and testify if he is subpoenaed. He will have no immunity. He has no anonymity immunity. Schiff lied about that in the hearings. The whistleblower statute that was created so that people could feel free to come forth with problems in the government without fear of retaliation only states that his name would not be on the complaint and the Inspector General would not know his name so that they would be protected. But it doesn't grant a blanket immunity that nobody will ever know who this guy is. I don't know what in the world Schiff was thinking, that he could keep this a secret forever. And in fact, early on, Schiff kept saying, we're going to have this whistleblower come. He's going to testify. We all want to hear him. He's got to testify. We want to hear from him. Until it was leaked out that, oh, by the way, he contacted Schiff's office and had help from Schiff's staff to help draft this complaint against the president. And as soon as that happened, Schiff changed his tune completely. Didn't want any whistleblower to come anywhere near his hearings. So this is a hypocrisy and actually the amateur status of Schiff as a prosecutor. He just muddled his way through all of it. And if you watched his closing statement the other day, he was becoming unglued. I thought he was going to start crying or something at some point near the end. I'll tell you what it reminded me of. There was an old movie from, I think, the 80s, early 90s with Dan Aykroyd and Eddie Murphy called Trading Places, where basically it was rich guy loses his wealth, poor guy gains his wealth, and it's like a Prince and the Pauper type of story. But at the very end, when the real bad guys in the story get stripped of all their money, you see this scene where at the stock market, Don Amici, his character, is almost crying out in pain, saying, turn those machines back on, turn those machines back on. And that reminded me of Schiff's closing statement. It sounded just about that pathetic. At any rate. So what's going to be happening here? We don't know. I don't know what the timetable is. The other monkey wrenches in all of this are the fact that December the 9th, the Inspector General's report is going to be made public. That's the person who's charged with examining all the potential mistakes and even criminal behavior that happened in the spying on members of Trump's campaign team in 2016 and 2017, even after he was inaugurated. Did they abuse the FISA court provisions in the law by getting illegal wiretaps to spy on people? Did they abuse their power? Were some of the people in the agencies like the CIA and the Department of Justice and the NSA and the FBI corrupt and abused their power? These are things that the Inspector General will look at. Were the procedures and the safeguards that are in the law, were they followed or were they not? And was it done maliciously? Was it done because of incompetence? But we already know that the Inspector General has already referred some of his findings to the special prosecutor Durham that Attorney General Barr has set in place. The Inspector General has already referred for criminal investigation, possible criminal prosecution in this case. So that means there was something dirty done, at least the appearance of that, and Dunham will be working on that. We don't know when his work is going to be done and when we're going to see indictments and court trials with anybody that he thinks is guilty at this point yet. Who knows how long that could take. He's going to keep digging until he has nothing left to dig, of course. But the Inspector General's report, where at least this is going to be exposed publicly for the first time, will come out on the 9th of December. So that's just in a couple weeks. That's the other reason why Schiff and Pelosi were trying to hurry through this as fast as possible, because, you know what, once you start overturning rocks in the swamp in Washington, there's no telling what you're going to find living underneath them. So that's part of what's going to come out here. And that's why the Democrats are already poo-pooing the Inspector General's report before any of it has even come out. Now, they've already leaked that there's a possible FBI-connected lawyer who intentionally forged one of the documents that led to the FISA warrants. I don't think it was the initial. I think they said they thought it was the reissue of them, because they're only temporary, then they last for so long. But if that's true, that there was somebody who intentionally forged some documents, that's a felony. That's real serious jail time. Now, maybe they're just doing this to get somebody to cop a plea deal so that they'll roll over and testify where the orders came from to do that. Who knows? We have no idea. But stay tuned. Stay tuned for this impeachment circus to continue. President Trump today said, hey, let's have a trial in the Senate. Bring it on. I'm ready for it. And that's Trump's personality. He doesn't hide from a fight. He doesn't back down. For good or for bad, he doesn't let anything go. So if he's defending the United States in doing that, that's wonderful for us, because we don't have to worry about our president compromising. But if it turns out it's just for his own interests, well, then it might not benefit us. But we have to wait and see on that. I mean, we haven't really seen anything where he's put his interests above the interests of the nation, at least not so far. So, and the good economy proves that, and some of the change in status in the world, that we now have the new respect and even the more harsh criticism from our typical enemies in the world shows that they now fear us more because of him compared to pacifier Obama. But at any rate, we'll see how this plays out, because the second act of the impeachment circus is still to come, and that will be what comes out of the Judiciary Committee, what the articles of impeachment actually say, and a vote in the House as to whether it will actually get sent to the Senate for a trial. The trial would be the third act of the circus. So who knows how long this is going to last. It's certainly going to go into the presidential election. I think I mentioned this before, that Senate rules dictate that all senators must be in session for this. They have to sit there through the whole session. They can't be absent, which means all of the Democrats in the Senate who are running for president, that's, there's 4 or 5 of them, Warren and Harris and let me think who else. I'm drawing a Bernie and a couple others. That means they won't be able to be on the campaign trail. They won't be able to go for the Iowa caucuses, the end of January, beginning of February. They won't be around for the New Hampshire primary, which is also in February. So it's going to really damage their chances to be nominated for president. So there may be a lot of back pressure by the Democrats, the ones running for president who are in the Senate, to say, we don't want this now, we don't want to destroy our chances, because basically that's going to free up Joe Biden and Pete Buttigieg, or whatever his last name is, to campaign freely because they're not in the Senate. So we'll see. And at any rate, I don't want to beat this horse any deader than it already is, but I wanted to give you a wrap up on how things have progressed with this impeachment. Again, the bottom line from all of these witnesses and all of this time and all of these depositions and all of the secret bunker meetings is nobody has any smoking gun, first person, solid proof that President Trump did anything wrong. That's the bottom line. If you're looking at just the facts, not the feelings, not the assumptions, not the hype, not the spin, and not the best wishes from people who just don't want to see Trump serve another day as president. So we'll see how it plays out. Again, as I've said before, my main concern here isn't to defend the president as much as it is to defend the truth. And what I saw so far on the part of the Democrats was to destroy the truth as much as possible to fit their own narrative, not to get at the truth. So let's hope we do one way or another. And what the end result will be can only make us more free and stronger as a people. So again, I thank you for listening. Please subscribe to our channel, hit the notifications bell, because I'll give more updates on this too. And thank you for being part of this great American experience that we have, this freedom that we have in this country. So thanks again, folks.